Hello and howdy, everyone. Welcome to a very special edition of AngularAir. We are here today and so excited for the latest release. We have Justin and Mike below me. Hello, guys. How are you doing?
Princess
Hey, you doing
Wave.
good?
Oh, Princess
Wait,
Wave. Excellent. I didn't know that's the vibe we were bringing today.
Bring all the vibes.
With us from the Google team, Emma and Mark. How are you both?
Doing great.
Yeah, very excited.
So, Angular 17. I am labeling this episode Secrets, Surprises, and a Successful 17 launch. And I'm knocking on all the wood because I know that's like, it will be successful. We will will it so. But congratulations on Angular 17. I'm so excited to dive into the details. But before we do you both want to give a quick intro to yourself in case someone is new to the community?
Go ahead, Emma.
Yeah, my name is Emma Twersky, and I work on developer relations at Angular on the core team. And I have a cat with me already, so that's how this is going to go. And I get to work with the lovely Mark. Mark, go for it.
Hey everyone, Mark Thompson here, better known as Mark Texan. I work on the Angular team working in developer relations alongside Emma.
Excellent. Well, thank you for joining us. And how would you like to start? Because we've had so many exciting things and leading up to 17. So do you know on the agenda where we should dive in first?
I don't know. I have so many things that we're excited about that we launched, but I think there is something that, a little special, something special that people who watched the live launch a few minutes ago, like if they saw it live, then they know about it. But Emma, please, let's give the people what they want. We already know why they're here. Let's give them what they want.
Drum roll, please. We launched angular.dev. So this is our new documentation website and the future home for Angular developers. We can go through it and talk more about it, but this was really a chance for us to relaunch our documentation and additionally, as you'll notice, a fancy new brand to really bring Angular into its next era or renaissance, as we're calling it.
Excellent. I love this idea, but I wanted to ask you, why did the team think it was necessary to have like a restart on the documentation? I have an inkling of why, but I would love to know the official answer.
The official answer. Mark, do you have an official answer?
I only have the answer from my heart. I can share that if that works. Yeah, so I think that the time that we're in with Angular, we're just shipping so much new stuff, and this is just a great time for us to capture all this like new attention for Angular and this Renaissance period that people are talking about, Angular momentum. Just a great way to capture that and to commemorate that with this new like angular.dev site. And it just gives us a new way to do that. It's still the same Angular that you know and love, but just like a new place for you to just learn about it and engage with Angular.
For me, it's so exciting because I do a talk called the Angular Renaissance right now. I'm actually going to Bulgaria Sunday to give it. And I am just so excited about what the team has laid the groundwork for, that like it's these doors of now that we have Ivy and now that the framework's ready, we can do things like standalone and we can do things like signals and control flow. And so I'm excited because I think it was getting a bit muddy on the entry point, right? Like where do I begin? What does that starting point look like for like very, very new beginners, even if they have done JavaScript and other frameworks before? So having this clean start where it is like this story that is like very well mapped out with the newer technologies in mind is just so brilliant. And I'm so excited for it. So thank you guys. So Emma, tell us about the site. As I see, we've got docs and tutorials, and can you give us some highlight of the newness?
Yeah, I can. So as Mark said, this was really a chance to like revisit how Angular presents itself. And it's the same framework you know and love, but over the last like 3-4 versions, we've launched so many new sort of like revolutionary features, from like bringing in signals from, the modern web and other frameworks doing that, to like really paving our own path of like a revolutionary modern control flow that has incredible performance impact on the framework. And so all of those things together really represent like a new way to learn Angular, a new way to like go through our guides and like figure out like our recommendations and best practices. So we took all of that, of all of the great work the team has been doing, and really thought about how we can do a few things. So within our docs section, we made a large overhaul to the actual content structure. And Mark and our docs team worked really hard on figuring out, like, the approach we took was, how can we make this really easy for people who are just coming to the framework, just coming back to the framework, to dive in and know the essentials. So you'll notice that we have like a very easy introduction section so that if your tech lead or your CTO is like, what is Angular these days? What does it stand for? We have that information for you. But if you're also brand new, you have this nice little modular area of just the essentials of like, okay, you know, frameworks have components, they declaratively render things, they manage dynamic data. These are like the tasks that you would expect to really need to do right out of the box as like a brand new developer. And so we have bite-sized little information on how to do all of that. Then these link into our in-depth guides where we really tried to break out like, okay, you're new, just start here. And then that allows us to take that new developer experience and sort of like segment it out so that our in-depth guides can go really in-depth and create like a little modular world of each of the Angular concepts and go in significantly more detail on like what you can expect to learn, what you might need to know, all of the like guides of things you might do with Angular. A lot of this is content from our angular.io docs, revisited, restructured a little bit. And we're slowly going through and rewriting a lot of this. So at launch today, the components guide is completely rewritten again for standalone, for really like making that switch to the new way to write components that our team recommends. We also plan to do the same with templates, directives, all of these other things as we integrate control flow and all of these other great stuff. So that's our docs. In tutorials, we took the same approach, right? Of like, we have all these developers coming to the framework and we want to provide an easy way to jump in and get started. So this is probably my favorite thing, but we have a new interactive tutorial called Welcome to, I guess this is the Angular tutorial or fundamentals, that provide 20 something steps of just bite-sized little exercises that you can do one at a time. You can jump in and jump out. Each one stands alone and allows you to learn that concept in Angular directly in the browser. So for example, here, if I do the component one, I'm learning how to write like an Angular template or Angular styles in this standalone component. And I can say, I actually want this to be purple. And it's updating right on the browser. So this is a way for, without like local development, without having to like get Angular set up locally, you can actually just learn Angular.
It's so clean. Like, did you all just like build this custom implementation to like run this?
Yeah, we did. And it took a lot of work, but we were lucky to work with the Stacklets team, which is one of our partners in open source. They recently launched like an entire API surface called Web Containers that allowed us to have the ability to run Angular on the browser. It's lightning fast. It uses the brand new vite dev server on Angular's side, as well as esbuild. So all of this is happening within vite with a really quick edit refresh time. And in general, everything you see on the docs is written with like the latest and greatest of what Angular v17 has. So it's control flow, it's standalone, it's all of these things to try and make this app as performant as possible. So yeah, that's been very cool to see. Mark,
I am overwhelmed with the coolness and just like the cleanness of the, not only the styling, because it's a very pretty site, but just the flow of content. It's amazing.
yeah. And I want to, Mark, I would love to hear your input on, so Mark is like the author and mastermind behind all of our tutorials. So Mark, Can you explain a little more of the thoughts behind like how we created this course?
So one of the things that I've been passionate about just since the beginning is solving for this one common thread that many people say, you folks maybe even said before, just because of this, the reality of it, it's too hard to learn Angular, right? Like you got to tell somebody else about Angular. It's too hard to learn. Too many things you have to know. And I found that that came from a lot of different places. Some of it was definitely on us as the Angular team. Like the way that we designed our documentation didn't give you a clear path forward to know, okay, this is where you start. Here are the minimal things that you need to know in order to just build an app. Right. We didn't create that path and be able to tell that story clearly. So since I joined the team, that's been something that we've been talking about and thinking about. And then as Emma, like, led this project, she came to me and asked me just like, what can we do to change that narrative? Right. And then we came up with this idea, which was to really break it down to the bite-sized parts of Angular, because I know that dependency injection is a major part of Angular, right? I know that forms are a major part. I know all these really important features are a major part, but you don't need all of that to get started. And that's the thing that I want to kind of pull the community back, because the problem is this: all the experts are like, yeah, if you want to get to where I am, you got to start here. But that's not the proper framing for people who are just starting. Right. So we just went down, even with dependency injection, right? A single page guide to get you started. No, this does not handle custom injection tokens, but you don't need that right now. What you need to be able to do is say, I have a service that has some functionality and I need to make it available to my component. How do I do that? Right. Now you can do that in one page without feeling like you need a PhD to like understand inversion of control and, and aspect-oriented programming and all these other like CS topics. Is like, yeah, how do you get stuff? How do you share things? How do you share resources in your application? And so we just redesigned this whole learning journey with these bite-sized tutorials to just really focus on getting those smallest bites to get you started. We want this to be done in an hour. Can you do this whole thing in an hour?
The whole tutorial, like all of that long
list?
That's
the goal, is to be able to do it in an hour.
Yeah.
And we'll get data back, right? So we're an evidence-driven team, and we'll get evidence. If people are saying like, oh, this thing took me 3 hours, okay, then we know we need to make changes, because this is not your class. This is not intended to be your classroom, right? This is intended to be, I don't know anything about Angular. Let me see why everyone is talking about it right now.
Okay.
Yeah.
And so let me do it.
The same way, and Mark touched on this, right? Like if you're coming back to Angular, right? You're like, hey, I've been developing with other web frameworks and I like know these concepts, but I want to see how Angular does inject-based dependency injection. I've been hearing about this inject function. How do I do it? Like the other cool thing about this is it's running in the browser. Like you're not going to have to set up your local development. That takes time. New developers and, existing developers, local setup is a pain point. But also like getting to the point in a tutorial where you get to learn that concept of the inject function means you've done a ton of prior work of like getting up to having an app that you can actually inject a service in. I think one of the benefits of this is like you could send people just this link,
right,
just this step, and just do this and be like, oh, I get like the modular concept of this one function. Now I can go use it in my application or whatever I'm building. Or like, oh, that's cool that Angular is doing that. Go on with my day. The other thing is that right now at launch, we have 2 tutorials. We have a fundamental guide that is built to be modular, like individual concept based and on the browser, as Mark was talking about, and really show like, here are the 20 steps we think will get you to Angular's fundamentals so that you can go and successfully build an application. Then we also have this course that allows you to go from like ng new all the way up until building this housing application. It's all designed to be downloadable, so you can download the code at any step and run this locally on your machine. We link to how to do a local setup. You can also do the first like 8 steps on the browser up until you add routing, because routing inside of like a web container is like kind of confusing for a learner. But this is meant to go from ng new all the way up to a full app. So we have 2 ways to learn, right? Do you want to learn modularly as like a concept-based learning thing, or do you want to build like your first full app on the browser or locally? this is also built, like we built tutorials, and something other frameworks maybe like what we see opportunity for that is beyond what other frameworks provide is there's a lot of blank space on this page because we plan to build a lot more tutorials. Like we would love to build a tutorial that just teaches you how to optimize an image with the optimized image directive. We'd love to build like just a control flow tutorial in depth. We'd love to build really any like an SSR tutorial. All of these things like are meant to like expand our tutorials into specific like knowledge concepts. So you can expect to see as we add new features, focused tutorials linked from our guides that teach you how to step-by-step add the directive, optimize the image, like look at the parameters in the console, things like that, as much as in the browser as possible. But again, providing a framework for our team to be able to write tutorials to get developers using the APIs and like learning the APIs correctly.
Emma, you brought up a really interesting thing about like going from the documentation into a tutorial. You made a distinction there. Can you talk about the change that we decided to do with the documentation around that?
Yeah, I like that we're prompting each other. I mean, we have a lot to talk about, right? Anyways, so in addition to the goal of this being to show Angular in its latest tutorial or latest like modern framework, right? Control flow, standalone, signals. Like we want to recommend one way to build Angular apps, and we want it to be that modern way. We also want to make it clear the distinction between like when you're learning versus like reaching for resources. So in our current documentation, one of the pain points we saw was that people will go to our reference section and they'll be looking for like just API details, right? What you can expect from a reference is, and we're recording this early, so these things will look a little different now, but like when I go to my reference section, I'm really just looking for like, what is the API of ng4 of, or what is the API surface? What are the like parameters in a value? And like, what does ng template context guard do? How can I provide like values to it, and what does it return? I don't expect to have guides there. Like I don't expect to be walked through how to use that. I expect to be linked to the structural directive guide because that is a structural directive. And in my guide, in the docs guide section, I expect to learn about that thing and like learn what that API surface does, not have the resource of like all the params and the return types. Then in my structural directive guide, wouldn't it be nice if when I want to go build a structural directive, I'm linked to a tutorial that walks me through how to do that in a step-by-step way. So instead of our current docs, which again, that pain point was like, there's sort of like this muddied divider between like our reference section had guides that then in our guides had like tutorial like content that had me suddenly reaching to like have to code something locally to figure it out. We really wanted to be like more clear about like the different things you can expect from the different sections of this website. So we're still working on this at launch because there's a lot of content that was migrated. But in the future, you can expect that in the docs section, you're getting guides. You're getting in-depth guides that teach you about a concept without you having to reach for local development to like do any steps. There will never be like steps that say, step 1, you have to do this, go do it. When you're ready to do a tutorial to like learn a concept from start to finish and implement something, you can expect to be linked to these tutorials. Again, we plan to build more, but like you will be linked to like a fundamental step that teaches you how to implement something. And then if you're just looking for like, again, the like return types, the like reference of what an API is, what its parameters are, what its returns are, and what the values are within it, that's where you can expect to reach and link to our API reference or our error reference that really just tells you like, hey, you're getting this error for this reason. And plan for these to really link you into our guides if you'd like to learn more about like the why and the how.
Wow, that's so powerful. And I did see that in the old docs where I'd be like, oh, that's a weird place. Or I'd be searching for something and only get an API reference. And I'd be like, but I know this exists. Like I know this is in here and have to go at it a different way. So that's my first question though is I see the V17 drop down caret. And when you're looking at Mark's talking about, we have these tutorials, and Emma's like, we're going to add more. Well, if I click and I go to 18, does it hide some that were created in 17, or are those all updated to 18, or how does?
Yeah, absolutely. So Angular.io will remain stable for versions through v17. So if you go to Angular.io, there's a version picker similar to this that allows you to go back in versions to look at documentation of like what was Angular's APIs in v14, etc. The new docs angular.dev will start at v17 and go forward. For anything prior to that, we will link you to angular.io. And the way our version works is that we snapshot everything in the like v17 world, and we freeze it and we deploy it so it will eventually live at like v17.angular.dev when we're on v18, and then angular.io will default to v18. The way those releases work, if we make changes, if we add tutorials, they will exist wherever the current version is. And if we end up deleting things or making changes, that would be reflected in like the modern version. We don't plan to delete these core tutorials. We might make changes to them. A great example is like when we originally wrote these, control flow didn't exist, but now control flow does exist. So for v17, these are written to teach you control flow with the like at-if syntax. If that somehow like magically changed, or let's say we got like a new control flow, we might add a step or change that in a future version. Okay. And it would again remain in like the version picker.
I don't know why, but my head was like, oh no, that means like control flow, for instance. Let's say it's like official in this numbered release. I was worried about going forward, like it might disappear because it was released in that number. Like, but you're saying it's like continuous. You're like bringing it forward. It's not, because I was like, okay, so features going forward will always live on. It's you don't have to go back and find the version it was released in to see how to use it tutorial. So
absolutely. So you can expect that any version, like let's say we're on version 20, whatever you find in the tutorial for version 20 is what we recommend developers build for an app built in version 20.
Okay.
So maybe it looks different. Maybe, at some point signals might come into here. At some point component-based signals might like make its way in here. And whenever they do that version forward, they'd have that. Something else you said that I want to touch on is you mentioned search. You mentioned like searching the docs. And honestly, I think this is my favorite feature, but like, Mark, give me a search term.
I can't even think of a thing that I already don't know to search for. Okay, search for
track by.
Track by. There you go. Justin coming in clutch.
That might, let's see. Right now it's going to bring you to directives. We don't have control flow in here yet. There is a PR open. But right now, if you search for track by, then you get all of the different places in our docs that track by is touching. And it will take you to directly where it's being built. And here, tracking items with ng4 track by. So I think like one of the pain points, we did a massive overhaul of our docs, and we really took a look at our current documentation and thought of all the different ways that we could make it better for developers. And there were a lot. A team that has sat with documentation for almost a decade, we recognize the weaknesses and strengths of our own framework, and we wanted to really make changes to show that off. And one of my personal pain points was search. I feel like our current documentation search limited how well a new developer could come to the framework and say like, hey, I'm really having trouble with this concept that I'm seeing in my console, and I keep getting this error. I want to search it and see the docs more clearly of I just want to fix this error, right? And so we were lucky to work with a team at Algolia that believes in open source documentation and was able to help us build a significantly better search experience.
So you do think it was the search experience and not the structure or what the docs actually were?
I think it's everything. I think
that we can do multiple vectors and for improvement.
Yeah, I think it's everything. I think like as I said, like we've overhauled our content structure. We've built tutorials in like a modular learning way. We've kind of tried to attack all of our pain points with all of the ways we thought we could build like modern docs to be better. And as Mark said, we're an evidence driven team, so we have a lot of analytics and a lot more granular analytics on this new site that will allow us to see people's like flow through the docs. How are they progressing? What are they searching? This is like that's something that we didn't have the ability to see on our old docs because of the custom search implementation, but we now have analytics in like a obfuscated way, obviously, to track like what are the top search terms we're getting, so that, you know, let's say we see people searching for something and not finding the results they want consistently, and there's some concept like control flow. If we get like a bunch of search for control flow and we don't feel like the docs adequately document that,
Right.
we will know for the next version or whatever that like we can go and document that and improve it. So again, like using evidence-based research to make sure that these docs provide like the best experience possible.
It's so cool. It would even give like an insight on priority too, of like, look at, you know, what the users are saying versus what we thought we needed to prioritize for the next release. That's really powerful. I'm excited about that.
Yeah.
So all the curation and the reorganization of the content, I think, is amazing, right? And that hits all facets, from existing developers to knowledgeable developers to people coming in to new. But for me, the real big bang for new developers is this ability to get in there and start writing code for a component, right? So like back in the day, Rob Wormold used to talk about this vision of being able to provide somebody an opportunity to write a component and play with the component just right in the browser, right off the bat, like see that experience of the component, because it's such at the heart of Angular, right? So now having this ability to do that here, and without all of the complexity you talked about before of a project, of all the pieces that go into an Angular application, right? Just get that all out of the way and just get right to writing a component. Like, this is amazing. And I think it's such a great entry for people. It's really the big thing.
Justin, think about this use case, right? That is enabled now by the tools that we have for the documentation site. You ever had an idea that you want to try like something in Angular, but you don't want to try it in your project because there are too many pieces like interlinked that makes trying or experimenting a little harder? Yeah, now you can just go to the documentation, right? You don't have to do anything. Just go to the playground and you could try that thing, right? For the most part, I'm sure that we'll find limitations at some point of some things you won't be able to do because, you know, you'll need other infrastructure to do it. But for the most part, I just love the idea. I'm like, oh, you know what was the syntax for this thing? But I can't really know if this will work. Let me just try it real quick. You know, so addressing that user need now through here. And there are other platforms where you can go further and deeper for a more full-fledged browser experience. But I think for like experimentation, we have something that we've never had before, and which is really fantastic.
Yeah, absolutely. It's you know, like when we do development and we're working on these things, when we're experimenting with things, we want to try and get in and test things out, or just experience things for the first time. I mean, this micro time is valuable, right? And so you cutting out this micro time, like even when we talk about going to something like Stack Blitz to test a component, right? You still have to navigate the file, find the component, go to that thing, right? Like this puts it front and center, like you're right to the code, right to the component, like you're reducing that micro time, and that adds up for all the things that we do, all the tasks that we do. So I think that this is like an absolute like rapid speed, you know, improvement for just our quality of life development, right? That's huge.
That was so cool, Emma.
Emma, please tell the streets what you just did, because I think that
I was like watching her and I was like, I don't think they
happened.
can see because this like the fonts. I don't think they can see she's
Yeah.
doing this live. That's so cool.
Now I feel like I need to make it. Oops. Yeah. So yeah. I mean, as Mark was doing that, I was trying to show what he was talking about. But basically, I'm in our playground, which is again the same infrastructure tutorials was built off of like running Angular locally, vite dev server, all that jazz. And if I refresh the code, oh, never mind. That's refreshing the dev server. But anyways, we have like a little playground example of like what to start with. And we have a terminal that allows you to create, this is blocked, so you can't do like certain commands for security reasons, but you can do like ng generate a new component, hi, and then I have a new hi component. I can like make changes or whatever, and then I can import it in my standalone application. So can I get it? Yep. And use it. For example, let's see. I can replace this. So yeah, for example, like we are releasing new syntax in V17 that is like new for a lot of developers, right? Control flow is like going to look new. And we want to make sure that like as that content is new and you're like, you know, let's say you just want to go learn or like test and play with this like brand new V17 thing, but you work at a large company and your company isn't going to be able to update to V17 on November 8th when it's out on NPM, right? Like that's really common. We recognize that a lot of people won't be able to do that. But like we also recognize that you're eager developers that want to go play with it. So come to our playground and like test out these new features. Like come play with things. Again, as Mark said, there's infrastructures that allow you to go a lot more in depth. But if you just want the Angular CLI already downloaded on your browser to be able to do simple commands like generate, what else does it do? The main component things. And then play with those files, import them, like test out standalone, test out control flow, all of these things. The edit refresh cycle is really fast and it allows you to play with things. So for example, I've created a hello and a hi component. I'm importing them and I'm already using them. And as you saw, like we've done our best to integrate a bunch of like the cool things that all of your favorite IDEs have to have like auto importing and stuff like that. The template syntax highlighting could definitely be improved, but that's something we're working on. But again, just in general, like, isn't it cool that I can like change this to false? Oop, that's not how you spell false. And it like refreshed here. And then if I click that, I see my hi component. And if I go change what the hi component says, like, hi, Angular show. And now I click reveal and like, hi, Angular show. So yeah, like giving away in a playground to like actually tinker with the framework. The Angular playground will always be pointed to the latest release of Angular. So it'll be on like whatever the most recent major or minor is. So if you're like super excited the day of a release and you're like, wow, I'm really excited about this like V17 feature, come play in our playground and test it out and like create little demos. One of the things we're excited to do is eventually have like a share button that allows you to like send this to people. Because wouldn't it be cool in our issues if you like could share a reproduction of an issue or share a reproduction of like an example. So that should be coming soon-ish. But yeah,
Alyssa really lit up when you talked about that share idea. Like,
I'm just like so overwhelmed. This is so cool. But like you can download and still share that way, right? Like
yes, you can. You can download the code as a snapshot anytime. You can refresh the dev server. But if you're like excited to test out the newest things, yeah. Yep. Totally.
Wait, so if I go and I'm like, we're on 20, right? And then I like go back to 17, is Playground still available for 17?
Yeah, it'll be released at the snapshot. So you can eventually, like we've thought about maybe adding a drop down here, but it's right here. So if you ever want to do like the RC or the next, the Playground will be on whatever version this drop down.
Okay.
Cool. Something cool under the hood just for like performance that's worth, well, it's going to show a bug right now, but something cool for performance, just because I know a lot of developers might be interested in this, is like we have the same Playground instance running under the hood on all of these pages, like paused for performance, obviously, if you're like in docs all of a sudden. But as you saw, like the edit refresh of this tutorial step when then switching to Playground is really fast. And that's because we worked, all of this has been written with like collaboration with the Chrome Aurora team to make sure that like the performance across this site is really next level for Angular. And that's because, again, we're open sourcing the docs. Like all of this will be in the Angular repository later today, Monday, November 6th. And we will be doing all of the rest of this work open source. But if you're interested in like a super performant example that uses SSR, it's all SSG'd, it's all using the newest hydration. The homepage uses a lot of defer to make sure that its performance is lightning fast. To look at like a performant, complicated playground. Eventually, we plan to make it zoneless once zoneless hydration is a solution that Angular supports. But all of these things, like if you're interested in like a semi-large scale application using the latest of what like the Angular team would build using V17, this is now open source for you to go look at. So just a call out there.
So like at no point are you not teaching, is what you're saying.
The site itself is a resource for the site. And something to call out there is like, we've found a lot of bugs. Like this site has become sort of the testing source for like all of the things you're seeing in V17 and beyond. So like the migration schematics for moving to control flow were tested on this repository. And like that is why this repository is not like all of this code is written with control flow. As I mentioned, like this all uses the new CLI application builder, which is the esbuild based system using the vite server. Not only is the actual application built with it, so that like our developers are using the vite server locally and it's all built with esbuild, but also like the playground itself is testing that and providing a sandbox to test that. We've found a lot of issues. We were really nervous that this would like leak somehow because there's been a lot of issues opened into Angular's core repo and the CLI based on the testing that all of the team has been doing here.
Mm-hmm. Not like an accident, like it was actually, it needed to be opened there?
Yeah, like a good example would be like Andrew Scott is one of the developers that works on Angular's router and is like the TL for the router. And obviously this all uses the Angular router, but even more so, it does a lot of lazy loading of router components, and it uses the brand new Vue transition API that the Chrome team pioneered on the modern web. And so if you look at like how the page transitions between pages, you'll notice that like there's sort of like a fun like load. There's no like flash of unstyled content or anything like that. That's because Andrew used this to experiment with what would the Angular router look like in V17 with the brand new Vue transitions API and like lazy loading. And so there's a lot of solutions here that are like, we're trying to push what the like next generation of Angular apps would look like and provide a resource for all of that. But that said, there are things because these are so new that like are bugs. For example, the Angular router doesn't have like, there's parts of the scroll implementation of the Angular router that like we would like to provide more customization of how you control scroll. So that, for example, in the resource section, you'll notice like there is like, we're using native scroll here to like tag each of these. But there's parts of that like the Angular router doesn't provide granular support for. So there's issues open on Angular's core repository to help fix that.
I got it. Okay, that makes sense.
Yeah, but there's like millions of examples of how like when our team is using this as like the first place to test.
I had a question when you were talking about reorg and restructuring all of this. And I was like, the thought came to mind of you and Mark and everyone around this massive table with just piles of sticky notes. And you're just like writing down on the old docs, like every chunk. And then you're like putting them in different piles and going back and forth and brainstorming. Like, how did that go down? Were there sticky notes involved? Like, it just seems so massive. I don't know how you tackled it.
Well, I'll say this one thing. One thing about Emma is that her organization skills are next level. Seriously, like, and I'm not just saying it to flatter her. I'm being honest. Her organization skills are like next level. And I think that without that, this would have been a much harder process for us as a team. But just excellent leadership from Emma. and excellent organization that kind of helped us corral like the sticky notes. Like I have a big pile of sticky notes for myself that when I go to meetings, I usually do. And you know what I mean? So organizing that stuff is already hard. And I'm not sure how she's managed to keep us all organized so long, but she's just really great at that. I mean, there's lots of modalities for us to think about things, and and it's a team effort, right? And people went and worked on parts. Like I went, she's like, hey Mark, let's work on the tutorial. And I was like, okay. And I came back with the tutorial like outline, and we iterated, right? And we took notes on, okay, these are things that are great, these things are not great. One thing though that I will say that I think is really fantastic about this site is shout out to our GDE community. Gave a lot of feedback and support too, just as we were like, getting it ready for launch. Just amazing, just really amazing. So shout out to y'all.
Yeah, I want to call out. So the blog post that's published today documents all of the contributors. We had, I believe, I can pull up the stats. I think we had over 35 people contribute to the docs, including a lot of people from open source who are trusted members of the team who, for reasons that this was a secret, are under Google NDA, who were able to help. We have amazing people in our GDE community that did that. We have amazing people who are just open source contributors who our team has partnered more closely with. If you're interested in contributing, this is like, our team is excited because I think this is like the best thing that we've launched that will allow you to contribute to open source and like such a large open source project. We get that question all the time, right? Like, how do I contribute to Angular? Angular is open source. We make a big deal of like emphasizing that we're open source. We publish RFCs. We try and work as in the open as possible, except for this secret site that we've been building. But now that it is open source, we recognize there's a lot of bugs. There's a lot of bugs in something this large that you build and want to get out into the public this quickly. There's typos in the docs all the way up until there's like bugs in playground performance. And we've had open source contributors secretly working on this and fixing a lot of things for us. And we owe a lot of this site's success to them. But also, if you see issues, go to the blog that announces this, and it walks you through different ways to contribute, opening issues, all that jazz. Once the code is merged to open source all of this, we will happily take your contributions. We already have people who are working with partner teams that are excited about adding documentation guides, and our team would love to work with you. And the other thing I was going to say, back to Mark's point, ignoring the compliments about organization, although I do love that I'm a very organized person. That is my largest strength. But I think the other thing that this was built on is our team, again, recognizes a lot of the things that we wanted to change about angular.io. One of the reasons that I'm still on this team is that I think Angular is very self-aware as a framework of our strengths and our weaknesses and our pain points and things we want to fix. I think if you ask anyone on our team, we all have things that we would like to do better for the framework. And it's because we all care at the end of the day about the developers using our framework. I think that's why we operate so well in open source. And I think that also has allowed us, when we said we wanted to make these changes, nobody in our leadership chain was let's scale this back. If anything, the only thing we've done is be pushed to be bolder, make bigger changes. So the first round of rewriting the documentation guides and order, we did take we have all of these docs. The easiest thing would be for us to just slot them into a new space on the new site. And so we had a solution that was that. And I think Mark and myself and all of the rest of the team weren't totally satisfied with that, because we felt like we were just taking what we thought to be sort of the problem and just reshuffling it. And that doesn't really solve anything. And so I think one of the best things we got early on was leadership being what if we just start clean slate and write what do we want the docs to be? And that's where Mark and the other people working on docs came up with this structure of really segmenting out these essentials. And you'll notice this isn't one-to-one of our old docs. So there's a lot of new stuff. Everything in essentials is brand new written. The what is Angular is completely overhauled. again, we've overhauled like certain docs versus bringing them directly from our old docs. And we plan to do more of that. And that's because, again, like everything on here is like representative of Angular as a team's approach to Angular, which is like we recognize its strengths, weaknesses, and like we are happy to be bold in changing things, I guess. That said, we're also like not strongly tied to what's here, right? Like we're evidence driven. We've said that if we get a bunch of feedback that something's missing, like we will happily change it. This site is being released as sort of like a preview, like the future home of Angular developers is what we're saying. And that's because angular.io exists for v17. And we recognize that this site is not fully stable, but we're committed to making it stable for v18 so that this is the site for Angular from v18 forward. That gives us 6 months, like half a year until the next release of Angular to really stabilize it. So we're looking for feedback. We're looking for like that evidence-driven support of like, if there's pages here that like people are searching for that they're not getting, like we want to make sure that this site is stable in bugs, but also in content. So if like there's something missing in the essentials that you're like, how dare they like get rid of this concept, or how dare they like whatever, contact our team. Again, like go to that blog, look at how to contribute, give us the feedback. Like we are actively seeking that.
Last question around implementation. How long ago did you all start dreaming this up? And
yeah.
Was this 6 months ago? Did you do this 6 months ago?
We are actively pushing code up until the moment that it launches. I think that it depends what you define as start. We started with the new brand, and we recognized that you can't just like put a new brand on the same old framework. And so we knew that the way we wanted to represent this new brand and logo and modern Angular was with a new documentation website. We see millions of developers on NPM using Angular every month with their downloads. That number has only really gone up over time as web frameworks have gained adoption on the modern web. And the documentation is the number one way that people see our brand, like interact with Angular. We first started exploring brand stuff like early this year, so like January. And I think it took us like 4 months to get something we were really excited about. And from there, we've been building the site ever since.
Wow. I honestly thought you were going to say 2 years. We've been working on these tutorials and docs for 2 years. That's what it looks like. So impressed.
Not
no.
2 years. No.
Okay.
You know what? We all worked together really well too. That's the other thing that I think the story that won't get told is how much synergy it required for us to, and I don't like that word for like most uses, but in this case, it's right. And Emma, I will love your feedback on this too, but I feel like the amount of work we were able to accomplish for this should have taken us 2 years.
It should have.
Right? Because of how much it was, but because we were able to really work together in the really special. I always say the Angular team, this version of the Angular team that I'm on right now at Amazon, I feel like this is one of the best teams I've ever worked on, just in general. That has been my feeling. One of the best like engineering teams I've ever worked on. And I've been working since almost 20 years in this industry. And to get to be able to work with people through hard stuff, like the decisions it takes to make this, right? Because think about going into a meeting and being like, okay, this is what I want to do, you know, with like this beloved documentation site, this beloved brand, and how much work it takes and how much like smart decision making it takes for people to put themselves to the side to figure out what's best for the community. I mean, there's so many parts of this story that won't ever get fully told, but it's why we were able to do it in the time frame that we did it in, because those things actually work together and those people work together and we were able to create this.
I think that's the amazing part, Mark, because you talked about how, okay, so I took that piece and I ran with it. And okay, they took that piece and they ran with it. But it doesn't feel like that. It doesn't feel like a bunch of randos did different pieces and then smushed it together. So that's the part where I'm like, but how do we duplicate this on our teams? The cohesiveness, I suppose. Did you have one person that was like the cake batter smear at the end that made all the cracks go away? Or was it truly just like the pieces fit? And we are perfect.
No, we worked together a lot. Like I didn't.
Oh, okay. You were
work
in
on the
isolation.
tutorials by myself in the closet and then not accept feedback.
Okay.
Like I went back to the team. Okay, here's what I think we should do. And mind you, here's what I think we should do. Not here's what we're going to do. It's a different perspective, right? Here's what I think we should do. And then Emma was like, I actually don't like the names of these things. I'm like, okay, let's talk about those. Right. And let's find, in some places I agreed, like, oh yeah, you're right. I don't like this name. Some places I was like, no, I really do like this. I would have got to keep this one.
Yeah.
And so what's the place where we can meet in the middle? Right. And then we did that a lot. We all did that a lot. That was a very big part of this process, is meeting in the middle whenever there was like, difference of opinions.
Cool.
Yeah, that's definitely a Google culture thing. A quick note on like how long this took, because I can't speak anymore to all of the like wisdom Mark just shared. Retweet everything he just said. But yeah, I originally tweeted that I was redesigning the logo on October 1st, 2021. It took almost exactly 2 years to come up with this from that. So that said, we didn't actually start until a year later, but maybe that spread the start for our leadership. I won't make that claim.
So I got a super important question about the logo. I'm noticing that the color is changing, right, as we sit here and watch it. How are we going to get that on a sticker? I mean, is this going to be like hypercolor stickers that change in the heat? Like how do we make that a reality?
Yeah, if only. Tell the creator of CMYK that they need to do that. Yeah. You know what's crazy is color on the web has advanced so much. I just saw a tweet by somebody on the CSS team that like additional color spaces are almost fully widely supported on browsers. And like another thing this site was written with is like all new colors. Like we tried to use the latest of what like color is on the web, because our brand designers came up with like such cool colors for us. And we really said like we want to own the Angular red. Like the Angular red is not gone here, but we wanted to expand the color space and take up like more color, like more room. And so we took the pinks and the purples and a little bit of the blues and like just expanded what Angular's color space is as part of sort of like modernizing and refreshing this look. That said, like a great question is, how do I get this on a sticker? And I'm on our press kit right now. So if you go to our new docs and you scroll all the way to the bottom, in the footer, there is a press kit. And if you click press kit, you get this page I'm on. And not only are we open sourcing the code behind this and launching the brand and launching this website, but we're also open sourcing all of our brand assets. So per usual, if you're press and you're somehow an hour into this developer stream, we have all of our logos for you. But we also, for all of the developers out there, are actually giving you access to our brand guidelines so that if you click this, I think I can share this tab. Yeah. This is like a open, accessible, official press kit on Google Drive that allows you to download all of our assets, as well as a slideshow that teaches you like sort of our guidelines from our designers. It also has variations and all of the logo asset files. So if you want the actual Illustrator files to make changes to, we recognize that a lot of people use our brand for various things. For example, if you're going to NG Poland tomorrow, one of the larger Angular conferences in Europe, they will be using this new logo. And the NG Poland logo is like a Polish, shaped, like a Poland-shaped country version of the Angular logo. And they've taken this new brand and modernized it using the asset files here. Many other things, I believe this exact stream also rebranding.
I was going to say those Illustrator files were clutch, because me and my husband were over there trying to figure out the gradient. I'd downloaded the logo and I was like, what is going on with this gradient? And then I opened up the press kit and was looking at the actual, because there's a color wheel of the gradient, because it's not a linear gradient. and then looking at the rules on you can choose from these points, but no more than this. And I was like, oh, but then I opened the Illustrator file and saw how you did it. And I was like, everything makes sense. So it was super helpful.
Yeah.
Thank you for those.
So as you'll see like today and throughout this week, obviously we've given early access to all of the brands that we know about, Discord, Twitter, like all the brands we own, as well as all of our GDEs, like podcasts, YouTube channels, conferences, meetups, all of those. Like we encourage you, if you are an organizer, to rebrand with us. So head to our press kit, download our brand guidelines, do what Alyssa and her husband did, and like open the file and make changes. Contact me or our team if you have any questions. There are press and media emails here if you are confused or need help on this. But yeah, there's also like an entire adapting the logo guide on how to adapt the logo. For example, we have like a Pride logo of like an official variant. We have a Signals logo, like different ways to adapt the shape, as well as some do's and don'ts. Yeah.
And I think all of those and more details are in your actual guideline document that you said you can download, which was really, really helpful. So definitely take a look at that.
They are. Also, come see our team. If you are at events with us, we have new stickers for you, as well as all of your old stickers have become vintage hyper collectibles. So yeah.
With the new branding, is this new branding going to be applied when discussing older versions of Angular, like 16 and below? Or should the branding around those versions use the previous logo?
So similar to if you're referring to AngularJS, you use the AngularJS logo. We don't frequently talk about like Angular v14 with a specific logo. So this is just the logo for Angular. It's meant to represent modern Angular. So we would hope that when you're talking about the framework, you're just talking about Angular and using this logo. But if you are specifically calling out like something on Ivy, I could see a use case for using the old logo.
Okay.
That said, like we would really like to make sure, again, like we're not really saying it here, but there are deprecated logos for old versions that we document here. Again, one of those pain points was like, we know that people still to this day are confused between the AngularJS logo and the Angular logo. That differentiation of name and logo, like frankly, like could have been further apart at the time that we launched those, and has caused like a lot of disambiguity in the like modern web world. So we're hoping that more colors help and all of the things we've talked about for the last hour.
Amazing. Well, Mike, Justin, questions? Any comments?
No,
So I actually have a comment.
Tell us, Mark. Tell us.
We spent our entire time talking about the new site and brand, and can you believe that we released even more like groundbreaking features with
That's right. Can you like give me a
We don't even have time to talk about the stuff that
bullet point?
I just want to put that there for the audience. It's not like a time check or anything. It's more like we have all of this stuff going into V17, and then we haven't even touched on things like defer, which I believe wholeheartedly will change the way the industry adapts. So frameworks will adapt and start doing things like we're doing with defer. I wholeheartedly believe it. And so Angular as a framework, we've had our times. So every framework is great. And I really do mean it. Every framework is great. Jeremy and I say that on our stream every month because people still ask us, what do we think? I think everything is great. I think lots of smart people are solving good problems. But Angular as a framework has had moments in history where we've kind of set the trend for where the industry will go with the way things are being done. What we're doing with deferred loading will be another one of those points in my mind in history. People will look back and say, oh, I remember when Angular, created this like new way of deferred loading with this like granularity in the templates. And now other frameworks do it.
Right.
And we welcome other frameworks because one of the things that as a core tenet, we always say we want to move the web forward, right? And this is a great opportunity where we're actually, I believe this, we're going to move the web forward. Like there are other tools out there that do things like deferred loading of like individual components, but I don't think that we have tools that do deferred loading that let you declaratively do prefetching and let you fine grain say, well, if I only defer load, if I interact with a button, and then show a placeholder, but only show the placeholder for a minimum amount of time. Only show the loading for this amount of time, maximum after this. I mean, like the combinations of parts. Can I show this real quick?
Please, I would love to. I was going to say, is that in tutorials or something that we could show? A chunk
I don't know if we have it in tutorials just yet, like some of these like details.
Yes, I want to see.
What do you want to show? I can give you the screen if you want.
Here, let me see if I can just share one thing. It's probably not going to work because I didn't follow good directions when we were asked to make sure that all of our sharing worked.
And I want to say, like, Mark is bold and like these are all correct, but I want to read. Well, here I'll let you show, but I would like to read some of the public benchmarks after you do this, Mark.
Oh, sure. Yeah, I just want to show this really quick. Like this syntax is what I'm talking about, right? And this is a lot of stuff. So let me go back just a little bit. Just like right there, right? Just that and alone is what I think is like a really cool part. You have this is in a template, right? We're defining our deferred loading, lazy loading based on interaction with the trigger. The trigger is when you click on the button, right? You load this component, could be a super large component for recommended movies. Boom, you got that. But now we let you declaratively say, oh, what's the placeholder content that I should show before this loading happens? But wait, this is why I say, you might look at this, you might say, oh yeah, people do that. You can look at suspense and React, like they do stuff like this. But look at this. When I'm loading, I can declare some template code. Okay? But you might say, oh, well, Mark, yeah, we can do stuff like that. Oh yeah, but then can you say, set some boundaries around the placeholder code? Can you set boundaries around when the loading stuff works? For how long during the loading should this show? And after how much time should this, and then I could do, oh, there's an error. So like, look at this very rich declarative language around what you can do. This is in your template. You're not even at the router level, like doing load component and all this kind of stuff. You're not even doing that. Like the reason I get so excited is because I believe this is like futuristic stuff. Right, in terms of like granularity of like loading views, and the work that the team has done on this stuff opens us up to explore even more advanced patterns.
Yeah, it's all written future forward. And I like, if you don't believe us, the public benchmarks like shocked me yesterday.
Oh, go ahead, show that, Emma.
Yeah, I can pull your.
It's just sentences in the blog post.
Okay.
Up to 90% faster runtime based on public benchmarks of built-in control flow loops. 87% improvement in build time with SSR enabled. 67% faster build speeds. And like truly the control flow benchmarks are essentially taking us from like where we currently sit at public benchmarks of runtime and moving us all the way up to like the only framework that is faster is vanilla JavaScript at this point with control flow loops. So like we are essentially like this feature, which I don't think we really emphasized the performance benefits when we talked about it in RFCs. Like clearly people were more concerned about the syntax because that's the developer experience you're going to interact with every day. Right. But like whatever that syntax is, and we now have a syntax that we're moving forward with, like the benefit behind that is that in those public benchmarks, when you think about all the frameworks next to each other and their runtime speed, like we are taking Angular where it's at, which it sits kind of in conjunction with some of the frameworks you'd think of that use push-based reactivity that we're like currently sitting with. It is just as fast as those frameworks as is, depending on them. And we're moving all the way up to the space of like solid of these like next gen frameworks that are really written for performance that have optimized solely based on that. So this is like Angular is the largest adoption framework that is now providing like solid or vanilla JS like speed to the millions of developers and like large scale enterprise applications already using it. And if you want to migrate to that, again, like Angular is built on reliability. So we have the migration scripts ready for you to automatically, with V17, run the migration script, get on control flow, and see that runtime performance in your application today.
Can you clarify there? Because if I'm a person and I'm like, I need this performance in my app. And so I use the migration scripts, I upgrade to the latest, but like, is that migration script putting control flow stuff in my templates? Am I rewriting that? Like pieces do I need to make sure?
So there's two scripts we're talking about here.
Okay.
ng update will bring you from v16 to v17. That migration script does not include control flow out of the box. Control flow is under developer preview. We are still testing it. We're still excited to like change the API and fix things. Correct me if I'm wrong, Mark. But and then
Mark's like, no, it's live.
Well, we have a preview of the migration that you can try.
We have a preview of the migration that you can try, that you can test. We've used it on, again, our docs website. We've used it on other test repositories. We've partnered with enterprises to test it. So you can go and try that. Things under developer preview are not recommended for prod. So I probably wouldn't go and deploy that to like all of KLM or whatever large customer that you work for, but you can get ready and run those migration scripts and have them ready. Okay. I believe I don't know when we plan to stabilize. I would assume in a future version coming soon, but you can start to test those things now.
But this is a great time to try it. And like Emma was saying about those performance improvements, I would just say this. I know it's going to be hard to take our word for it just because we are on the Angular team and we are very excited about it. Try it and then come back and let us know what happened. And just don't be surprised if you try it and you find out that places where you were using ng-if, ng-for, ng-switch, that the code is not cleaner, more readable, but also more performant, because the removing the layer of the structural directives allows us to get closer to the metal of the rendering engine. And so that changes the way. And then look at ng-for right now. You already know, as senior level folks, you got to do what? If you want it to be fast, you got to add track by, right? You got to write a track by function, bump all of that. We're changing that to be track is required and it's no longer a function. Now it supports expressions. So now you can do a track expression, but you can't write it without doing it anymore, because we want you to take advantage of those fast updates that we can make in cases, because now we're able to, always use that track. So then it's like we're helping you to be as successful as possible, right? And that's the really big magic thing that we're doing with the 4. I know I sound super excited about this, but like I honestly believe that, again, like I told you, this is that point in history where people will be like, wow, I remember when Angular did this thing, just like you remember when the Ivy came or when it was slow, like you remember that moment. Now you'll remember when V17 came, when we had the new documentation. You'll remember when we launched defer, when we launched new control flow, and how that changed the way that you created Angular applications on your teams and organizations.
Yeah. And I think the difference is you'll remember Ivy if you are a current Angular developer, right? Because that was a pain point that helped Angular developers. But at the time, we even said, like, Ivy's cool, but it's really enabling the future of what we want to do with the framework. Now you're seeing that. And this is the point where we are, like, the reason to launch docs now, not that V17 has everything we want to do in it, but we feel we're in the spot to do an Angular renaissance where, like, these are the features that you'll remember if you're not an Angular developer. If you're on these other frameworks, like public benchmark test us. Like we are confident that what we are doing now is not just for Angular developers right now, but for the modern web. And we are like now in a space to push the web forward, to provide benchmarks, to provide performance that is cutting edge, that has things that other frameworks don't have. Like defer really is. As someone who just wrote a homepage with defer, like all of this animation is defer, like it is cool. And I haven't seen it before on the web. And that's really cool to be in a position to do that with Angular now.
Oh, wait, you said that this, like when we pull this down, you're doing this with defer in the...
Yes. Oh we are. So if you scroll through all of this, like this playground at the bottom is like a great candidate for defer, right? Because like cool marketing animation, I'm scrolling really fast, but like, look how fancy we are now. We also have our playground on the homepage that allows you to like play with Angular on the homepage. It's a callback to the original AngularJS website. For those who like remember us from that day, we wanted to like make a cute little reference. That said, like if you don't scroll all the way to the bottom of this page and you're loading our homepage because you're excited about our new docs, you shouldn't be loading this component. Like this playground should not be loading. And this playground is performant as it can be, but it's an entire Angular playground running in the browser. So this is all written with defer. So we're deferring the load of everything down here for those who trigger the scroll. Yeah.
Alyssa, I want to hang out with you all and Mike and Justin, but I got to go. We're busy folks. Launch day is a busy time.
Yeah, absolutely.
So
Thank
we
you
got to
all so
run.
much.
But thank you for having us. It's been a blast.
Congratulations and thank you.
Yeah.
Can I just plug one thing? If you did not watch us on the live stream today, watch the live stream replay. You definitely got to watch it so you can know exactly what happened, so you can be in the room where it all happened. Definitely rewatch the live stream and continue to just support Angular. We appreciate all of you in the Angular community. Thank you so much for being who you are.
Thank you. Thank you, Emma. Thank you, Mark. Bye, everybody. Kendo UI is a suite of component libraries for these frameworks: Angular, React, Vue, and then, of course, jQuery. And I once had someone come up to me and was asking me, isn't that a lot of work for your devs to support all of these different versions? Because it's written in Angular, or it's written in React, or it's written in Vue, right? And I said, yes, it is a lot of work, but that's why I stand Kendo UI. They put in the time and effort to make it an incredible framework and to have that native feel for developers, no matter which one they pick. It also has over 100 UI components per flavor, and we have an incredible technical support team that's there to help build out complex situations or help you debug situations. So 10 out of 10 on technical support. But my absolute favorite feature of Kendo UI is how easy it is to customize. I've used different things before, and they weren't as easy to customize or integrate with, and they were very overly specific or overly generic, and it was just difficult to write my own custom CSS or even rebrand with our company styles. And so that's something I've had an amazing time with Kendo UI. You can see 3 different UI list views here, and each one has a different amount of features, but each one also looks a little bit different, all the way up to super, super duper customized. You wouldn't even know it was the same component because of how customized those list items are. So it's very unlike other frameworks in that way of how customizable it is. So check out Kendo UI at kendoui.com for your free trial today.